Federal government to disburse 300 million naira MSME survival fund to mark 60th anniversary. Rice production increases by 1.2 million metric tons. Oil slips as demand worries offset hopes for stimulus. And on Business Express, we shall be taking a look this morning at the suspension of electricity tariff and possible commencement of service reflective tariff rather than the cost reflective. And what's the way forward for the downstream sector? This is Business Express and it is reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Leakating Babatunde, your guide. Government has concluded arrangements to share about 300 million naira under the National Medium, Small and Micro Enterprises MSME Survival Fund scheme to about 333,000 artisans and transporters as part of measures to commemorate Nigeria's 60th independence anniversary on October 1st. The government named target beneficiaries of the scheme include mechanics, taxi drivers, hairdressers, motor and tricycle riders, plumbers, electricians, among others. It said the beneficiaries are to be drawn from 12 states, including Lagos, Bauchi, Kaduna, Kano, Plateau, Borno, Ekiti, Anambra, Abia, Kogi, Ondo, and the FCT for this first phase of the scheme. The Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Mariam Katagum, made this known in Abuja while briefing journalists on the government's preparation for the anniversary. Katagum, who is also the chairperson steering committee of the scheme, disclosed that each beneficiary will be given a one-off payment of 30,000 naira. According to her, about 174,574 MSME operators have so far registered for the scheme, with 5 states recording the highest. 23 federal ministries have developed a joint roadmap of workable strategies towards actualizing President Muhammadu Buhari's vision of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty within 10 years. The Ministry of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs is coordinating the Presidential Poverty Reduction Initiative.
It has a ray of hope for all of us, so that for siting industry along economic corridors, you know where you are going to put these industries.
If we want to get it right in empowering or flushing out poverty in this country, women must be in the center stage.
For countries to achieve the 2030 agenda, the international community must pay close attention to the nexus between illicit financial flows and the inability of most developing countries to mobilize enough domestic resources to finance their development priorities. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo stated these at the launch of the United Nations Economic Development in Africa report on tackling illicit financial flows for sustainable development in Africa.
All leaders whose countries are considered absolute outliers for illicit financial flows to join forces and take the responsibility of combating the scourge by insisting on the repatriation of illicit funds and their proceeds.
Now, the organized labor early Monday suspended its planned industrial action over hiking pump price and electricity tariff after an offer of some palliatives by the federal government to cushion the effects of the increases. The suspension of the strike was reached in Abuja after an exhaustive negotiation between the federal government and labor, which led to the signing of a communique by both parties.
We all agree that all issues cannot be resolved at once, and this understanding is to have a plan on how those issues shall be finally resolved in the future. Majorly on the issue of increase in PLS price and increase in electricity tariff.
We have discussed the issue of the state of our refineries with timeline on how to achieve sustainable refining and therefore to divert our policy option from the issue of solely importing.
Federal government to make available to organized labor 133 numbers CNG LPG driven mass transit buses immediately and provide to the major cities across the country on a scale on the basis thereafter to all states and local government before December 2021.
Agreed to set up a technical committee which will work for a duration of 2 weeks to examine the justifications for the new policy in view of the need for the validation of the basis for the new cost-reflective tariff as a result of the conflicting information from the fields which appear different from the data presented to justify the new policy by NEC. Now, today on Business Express, we shall be looking at the issues surrounding the grouse by the organized labor against government and implications of the policies now being reviewed. Joining me virtually from Lagos is Balazaka, a public commentator. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you.
Now, for decades, successive administrations have grappled with the issue of power. What are the forces at play here?
Well, no, there are no complicated forces. It's just the issue of lack of planning. If there has been planning, I mean, simple questions will have been asked. What was the population of Nigeria in 1970? What was the population of Nigeria in 1980, in 1990, and in the year 2000? What was the volume of activities that we had, you know, in 30 years ago? What is the volume that we have today? You know, when you talk about consumption of power, you have strategic industrial sectors, strategic domestic sectors, and strategic commercial sectors. How many were they 20 years ago, 30 years ago? So it has to do with planning. As the population keeps rising, you should expect that the requirement for power will also increase. So it's just effective and discipline in planning that probably we didn't have, or at a point we ignored.
Now, this multi-year tariff, the model now, since it was introduced, has been giving investors huge returns on their investments. From 2008 to date, shouldn't there be adequate investment in this very energy sector that has been very worrisome to the country?
Well, like you said, they've been generating revenues. You know, the investors have been generating revenues. But when you talk to the investors again, they will make you to understand that, or they will tell you straight away that since that agreement or that understanding of the multi-year tariff order was put in place, they were not allowed to be incrementally or regularly or occasionally, you know, to be reviewing their tariffs, so that, I mean, they can generate the necessary margins that will make them to do the necessary investment. But one thing is very clear. When you are talking about private sectors, they are after maximization of profit and minimization of losses. That's what they do. They try to minimize costs and maximize profit. So when you talk to them, what they will tell you is different. When you talk to the authority, in this case government, what government will tell you is different. But for those of us who are consumers, we believe that the solution is probably in the middle. And still in that area, when you look at the meter asset providers, I mean, at a point, they were supposed to be assisted, you know, to be providing the meters. But as we speak today, I mean, there are no enough meters, and that's why a lot of consumers are complaining. So it's a very complicated issue. when you talk to the investors, they tell you a different thing. When you talk to the government or our leaders, they tell you a different thing. But for those of us who are loyal citizens, we believe that, I mean, we cannot finish discussing in national interest. But the truth is somewhere in between the investors, that is the private investors, and our leaders, which in this case means the government.
Now, a quick one. Now, these concerns, of course, degenerated to a point where the NLC wanted us to go on strike. But now the increase has been suspended, as announced, with considerations which would also include is going to include future tariff, the government around the future tariff. Do you see a service reflective tariff methodology working and its benefit to the economy? Your thoughts on that?
Like you said, service reflective methodology. I mean, that is a very good phrase and an excellent phrase. But after writing that phrase, will it just become an ordinary phrase, or people will read meanings into the words that constituted that phrase? That's what we will expect. And for people like me, I will not expect it to actually be called suspended. It should rather be revised, because on the 1st of September this year, when I discovered that the tariff has been increased, I went and purchased some units. So if you want to, if there is a need for continuous discussion or negotiation, people like me who went and bought units that I was buying at 28 naira and now I bought at 56 naira, is it possible that, I mean, it can be reversed and I have my credit doubled? That is just for me as a consumer. But any negotiation that will lead to the betterment of the life of Nigerians will be highly appreciated by Nigerians.
Well, we understand that yesterday some people started seeing reversals on their meters, but that's on one hand. Now let's take the other leg of the issues. Now, the regulation of the downstream sector, which also was on the front burner as at the time of the discussions. Subsidy on petrol remains removed, and in its place, palliatives, of course, to cushion the effect on the working class. What's your view on this?
When you say you remove subsidy, then you bring in palliatives. For somebody like me who is an ordinary citizen, but a loyal citizen of Nigeria, my interpretation is this: you will create a wound, then quickly provide drugs to take care of the wound. Then if you knew you had things that will make you not to create the wound, why were you creating the wound in the first place? As far as people like me are concerned, we will wait and see how the palliatives will come. Because to some of us, I mean, we have our political leaders, then we have our labor leaders. All of them are our leaders. For them to have spent hours and hours and days negotiating, I don't want to believe they are fooling us, the citizens. Somehow, somewhere, they are trying to look for solutions that would better our lives as Nigerians.
Okay, now part of those solutions now was the issue that came up, the issue of revamping refineries. It was one of those solutions. But of course, when you observe, it predates this administration. Do you see this working out as agreed? And what are the factors that can make this happen?
The factors are very, very easy as far as I'm concerned, because when you talk about refinery, refining is still basic chemistry. It has not changed. In fact, the technology of heart surgery or kidney transfer or surgery on the liver is even more complicated than the technology of refining. So I think at some point, we had people who were given the responsibility to manage our oil and gas industry, especially our local refineries, and they didn't have the interest of Nigerians at heart. Because we have basically Nigerians managing the refinery and managing it. So something tells me they were probably not as loyal to the country. They betrayed us, and they didn't treat us in national interest. But honestly, refinery and refining technology is not a new technology and is not a complicated technology.
Okay, now there's also this tilt towards gas. And Nigeria is still flaring gas, of course. The bulk of gas at our disposal we flare. How can proper gas usage be employed to reduce focus and strains that come along with petrol?
First of all, gas is even a fossil fuel compared to petroleum. You know, while petroleum is a cleaner fossil, cleaner fuel compared to coal. So, but because we were not able to manage our crude oil very well, I tend to feel worried that if care is not taken, if we don't have the right people, the gas strategy may go the same way. What I will want is this: it's very clear from gas alone, we will generate energy. We know that from gas alone, you will get what we call ammonia. From ammonia, you will get urea. So from urea, you will get fertilizer. So we have all these endowments. It's just the management that makes the difference. I mean, it's just like the refineries. If we refine internally, even if it is 10 naira that we are going to be saving, multiply 10 naira by 50 liters per day, multiply that by 30 days in a month, multiply that by 365 days. So
That's
it will be
true.
so much
Yeah,
to
that's
gain.
true. That's true actually. So let's quickly wrap this with this last question now, and I will need it to be as brief as possible. What is the cost of industrial actions if the organized labor had succeeded in shutting down the economy with the effects of COVID-19 still at play? What would be the cost?
The cost will have been huge, negatively huge on Nigeria. And I will wrap up with a very simple example. Assuming that strike had gone on and the cost to a Nigerian is just 1 naira, then when you have 200 million Nigerians, the loss will be 200 million naira per day. And when you multiply it for 1 week, it will be 200 million naira multiplied by 1 week. Meanwhile, we know that to some people, a day is more than 1,000. But even at the rate of 100 naira, because 1 naira, because we are about 200 million Nigerians, it will be 200 million naira per day lost to Nigeria, which is not good for an economy, for our leaders, and for us as citizens.
Thank you very much, Bala Zaka. I would like to just rest this conversation here. We've been speaking to Bala Zaka from Lagos. Thank you for making our day this morning.
Thank you very much, man.
Thank you. Now, the federal government on Monday said its interventions in the rice value chain led to an increase in rice production in Nigeria by 1.2 million metric tons within 3 years. Minister of State for Agriculture and Rural Development, Mustafa Shahudi, said these while addressing the federal government rice farms and mills in Omor and Umerum at Ayemelum local government area, Anambra State, under the Agricultural Transformation Agenda Support Program 1. Shahudi said government would revitalize its rice farm in Anambra to boost rice production, create jobs and improve the living standards of people in the state and the region, noting that the country has increased its production from 4.8 million metric tons of milled rice in 2015 to over 6 million metric tons by 2019, with huge reduction in the nation's deficit. Now investors gained 98.51 billion naira as the NSE All Share Index inched up by 0.72% to open the week positive. It resumed this morning at 26,507.84 basis points as against plus 1.28% it appreciated previously. The market has seen increasing investor appetite as bond yields decline. This was further propelled by the Monetary Policy Committee's decision to reduce MPR by 100 basis points to 11.5% at its meeting early last week. Now, oil prices fell on Tuesday as demand concerns driven by COVID-19 outweighed hopes that U.S. lawmakers and the White House were nearing an agreement on a new stimulus package to revive the world's biggest economy. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures slipped 17 cents to $40.43, while Brent crude futures also fell 17 cents to $42.26 a barrel. Both benchmarks rose about 1% on Monday. Commodities markets had crept up in early trade as Democratic lawmakers unveiled a new $2.2 trillion coronavirus relief bill, which U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Nancy Pelosi said was a compromise measure. Brent and WTI in August hit their highest level since early March on optimism over rising fuel demand and major oil producers' strong compliance with promised supply cuts, but have since dropped by about $3 on demand worries. In another negative demand sign, government data showed on Tuesday that crude imports in August to Japan, the world's fourth biggest consumer, slumped nearly 26%. Now, well, we told you, of course, that oil prices are down this morning, but gold prices held steady as the U.S. dollar retreated from a 2-month high, with investors looking forward to the first U.S. presidential debate on developments, of course, on the new U.S. coronavirus relief bill. And European markets opened lower this morning, followed by Brexit, U.S. politics, and coronavirus. Over to Muplang Dakok for performance of stock markets across the globe.
Asia Pacific were mixed in Tuesday trade as logistics firm ZTO Express climbed in its Hong Kong debut. The Hang Seng Index in Hong Kong dipped 0.60%. Mainline Chinese stocks were higher, with the Shanghai Composite up 0.36%, while the Shenzhen component added 1.168%. European markets retreated at Tuesday's open, pulling back from Monday's rally with Brexit talks, potential fiscal stimulus out of the US, and the first presidential debate on investors' radar. The pan-European stock 600 fell 0.5% at the start of trading, with banks shedding 1.3% to lead losses. U.S. stock futures ticked slightly higher on Monday evening ahead of the first presidential debate on Tuesday. Futures for the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose about 80 points. Contracts for the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq Composite also closed positive. Stocks in Africa are off to a slow start and yet to post numbers, as market watchers predict sentiment will likely be buoyed by news of progress towards a fresh fiscal stimulus package in the U.S.
Now, the dollar held steady against a basket of currencies on Tuesday as financial markets braced for the first U.S. presidential debate, while traders also tracked developments on the stimulus bill. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming. Be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. You can also communicate with us on Twitter, and the handle is NTA News Now. Don't forget to use the hashtag. It is BizEx. Business Express returns Wednesday at 3 p.m. I am there, Kating Baba Tunde saying, stay safe out there.